Hello, Colleen. Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Thank you for taking the time today to meet with me and do a session for the summit on thriving with the AI advantage. I'm Laura Aziz. I am the founder of Meva Solutions, a coaching and consulting business. And my mission is to help people, women and men, in business accelerate their success and live a life by choice, with freedom, with money, with time, and enjoy themselves. The bottom line is to be happy. I have with me today Colleen. Colleen is a leader in the industry. In her prior life, she was a financial advisor, but today she's a consultant. She works with women entrepreneurs to help them live a good life, grow their business, scale the business. And I think that's where we connected. We are both focused on accelerating success and living a life by design, not by default. So, Colleen,
mhm,
welcome and tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know I didn't say everything, you have a lot to share. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura, too, for hosting me. I just love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're putting together this summit that's really focused on thriving with AI because I think it's such an important topic. So thank you for taking time to chat with me today. Of course, I do have a lot to share, and we don't have a ton of time, so I won't go into a ton of details, but just a little bit of a snippet of my background. As you mentioned, I was a financial advisor. This was 20 plus years ago now. Actually, 2018, I think, was when I left the financial industry officially after about 25 years in the industry. But during that time, I also founded a nonprofit quite by accident. I call it my oops baby. I never meant to start a nonprofit, but sometimes that's what happens when you're looking for a solution for yourself. And then you realize other people actually appreciate that solution. So the quick story there was as a financial advisor back in the early 2000s, I was trying to find clients, and being commission only, it was really difficult. I didn't come from a family that has lots of friends with money. I typically have always helped the underdog, the small person that's just trying to get ahead in life, which doesn't always correspond with great clients for financial advising. I mean, typically you want to find people that have already made their wealth and have already done really well. But I love to help people build that wealth. And as a financial advisor, I found that I loved networking. So I was at every networking event, and that's where I ended up finding a lot of my clients. Being young and being female was difficult in a very male dominated industry. But when I was casual, whether it was sitting there with a plate of cheese in this hand or, my business cards in this one or whatever, I found that it was much more comfortable for me to have conversations about difficult topics like financial planning in a much more social environment. So I had become quite good at networking, and I went to every networking event in town. And then one night, literally overnight, we got hit by a hurricane. And it was a Cat 4 hurricane that did billions and billions of dollars worth of damage to our town. It was also one that was projected to go a little further than we were. And it turned in the middle of the night and kind of hit us unexpectedly. So a lot of people weren't prepared, unfortunately, and it did quite a bit of damage in our town. Quite literally, not only the physical damage that it did, but it also changed the landscape of how business was done in town. And literally overnight, every networking meeting went away. People weren't concerned anymore about networking. They were trying to figure out how they were going to rebuild their homes, their businesses, find out how to survive in a town that had been devastated. And so I was about the same. I was struggling, not knowing where I would find my clients. And I ran into other girlfriends that I thought they knew what they were doing. And I'm sure you've seen people like that, Laura, where it's like you just think this person's got it going on and you ask them for advice and you find out they really are as stuck as you are. And that's exactly what happened. These other two women that I reached out to, they were just as stuck as I was, but they were looking for solutions. We didn't have the solutions ourselves, but in reality, we had the solution for the other person in the room. So the other two women had solutions for me, and I had solutions for them. And that's how my Oops Baby was born. That was the very first time we met. And then we started meeting every single month after that. And that was 2004. So last year we celebrated 20 years as a nonprofit, helping support women entrepreneurs in the Gulf Coast of Florida. I still love to continue that mission. We've gone through a couple of changes because I realized the way we were doing it was not necessarily helping women in the best way. So we've readjusted, we've pivoted, and now we're continuing that charge. And I love to help women there with a program we call Power Up Your Tech, where we collect used technology and then we rehome that technology. Once it's rebuilt, we rehome that technology to women entrepreneurs in the Gulf Coast of Florida, but we also wrap it with coaching and support services to help them work smarter, not harder in their business. Because I believe that when women build stronger and more effective businesses, they don't just make money for themselves, they pour that money back into the community. They pour that back into their families. They pour that back into their school systems. And they do things that are really, really impactful for building community. That's what I love about women. They're so good at caregiving.
That is amazing. Amazing story, by the way. And I want to ask you, the first thing that came to mind when you said you're supporting women in Florida, are you looking to expand or is it only in Florida?
Definitely looking to expand. As a matter of fact, in our micro cohort that we just started in October, we've got one participant that's in the state of Alabama. So we've expanded just slightly there, but that was, to be honest, that was quite by accident and not on purpose. Right now, we're limited to the state of Florida, but the plans are to bring our program national, because I would love to help women all over the United States.
Exactly. That's my feeling is that what you're offering is so much needed. And with Zoom and all the technology we have, many other people can benefit from it versus being just localized in Florida. I'd love to help you with that also, like to really look at the national plan and then global. Like,
I would love that. Let's do it. Yeah.
So one of the things that we always talked about is obviously managing time and managing money. And they go hand in hand because you can have more money if you are working more, and then you run out of time to do things that you like. And if you scale back, at least in my consulting experience, if you scale back or you take a week off, you're not paid. So then you start worrying, like how much time off can you take? So there is this, it's an equation that's always, like going up and down. But you have a different perspective at it, like coming at it from abundance and coming at it from the way you struck the strategy around pricing the business, pricing the services you offer, and maybe also sourcing clients. So you have a full pipeline versus getting some clients, focusing on them, they finish, and all of a sudden you don't have any clients, which many small entrepreneurs or solopreneurs tend to get trapped in that. They get busy with the clients, they don't plan for the future, and then find themselves in a difficult position. Do you want to share a little bit about the strategy that you have, like pricing well and having a continuous flow of prospects?
Absolutely. So definitely 3 areas that I work in my business are around strategic planning, because you've absolutely got to know where you're going in order to plan to get there. I also work with inefficient operations. So a lot of times we as entrepreneurs are doing so many different things and we keep so much of it up in our head. But sometimes when we get stressed or when we get busy, it can be difficult to manage all that's in our heads. So I try to help women really, really download that to more, on paper, or have processes in place, get some of that stuff out of our heads so that we can really think clearly and we can really move forward with intention. And then the other area that I work on is definitely around pricing, around revenues, and around profitability. So that's a big area. I think that women are so good at so many things, but when we talk about money, all of a sudden women get really nervous. They either get embarrassed to talk about it, they get there could be a lack of confidence when it comes to pricing strategies. And most often what I see is a lot of times when people get asked to discount their pricing, when they're really passionate about saying, here is my price. I would love to work with you. And clearly there's a need for what I do. Would you like to move forward? And somebody says, oh, I don't love that price. Can you drop the price? Unfortunately, I think a lot of women without a strategy behind it, sometimes we do that. And that can be really difficult if you're building a business. And women, a lot of times, I believe, have gotten used to working hard, not because that's how we should do it now, but that's how we needed to do it in the past. A lot of the predecessors, the women that have paved the path that I'm walking on now, really didn't have a choice but to work hard. I believe now with the technology, with the access to information, with connections and skills, that we don't have to work as hard as we used to. We can work smarter. And discounting is one of the ways that if your confidence is not there and you discount your prices, sometimes you have to work twice as hard to replace that small amount of a discount. Even something as small as 10%, depending on the size or the cost of your products or services, 10% can cause you to have to find 3 times the clients, depending on your price point.
Yes.
So understanding those numbers and understanding the strategy behind that is a big part of what I do to help support women.
I love it. There are a couple of things that are coming to mind, Kolleen, when you're talking about that. When you said pricing, revenue, profitability, but it's also, and I believe we mentioned it before when we were talking, the mindset that it's not just the numbers, it's not just how you price, because we tend to underprice because we think that we don't want to overburden others, or maybe we're not good enough, or nobody's going to buy it if it's a little over that. The other trap that I believe some businesses get into is not having incremental increases every year. So they set a price, and then that price stays for like 5 years, and all of a sudden, you're like everything else went up, all the goods and supplies went up, but you did not look into your pricing structure and revise it. And the idea of doing an annual kind of review and matching the industry, matching the market, so you stay up to date all the time.
Absolutely. I agree with that so much. And there was an important statistic. So I know you're in the United States. Remember during COVID when they offered PPP loans to individuals? In the state of Florida, and I didn't find this out until about a year after all the PPP loans were given out and were awarded as grants. I found out through some reports that in the state of Florida, women-owned businesses received $5,000 less on average than male-owned businesses. And I always thought that was really interesting. It shocked me because, of course, I'm a numbers person. I love the flow of money and how numbers impact us. But it was really impactful because I thought, okay, the PPP program was a governmental program. It wasn't loan officers saying one person got a loan and another person didn't, where we typically see a lot of women get discriminated against in funding is individual loan applications that are being approved or denied. With the PPP loans, it was a program. You entered in numbers and it spit out whatever amount you would get as a PPP loan. So the only way for women-owned businesses to make $5,000 less, to receive $5,000 less than those PPP loans, was exactly what you talked about. The numbers they were putting in were undervalued in comparison to other existing businesses of similar caliber. So if women aren't paying themselves enough, if they're not charging enough for their product, well, then the numbers they put in those PPP calculators were going to be undervalued. Therefore, they received less money. And the state of Florida is an example, but other states across the United States had similar results as well. It wasn't just Florida that there was this big discrimination or difference between male-owned and women-owned, but it definitely was in the state of Florida and across the United States.
That's a very good point, that the undervaluing our time, undervaluing our services. And you, in your offer or in your practice, you do help women in pricing their services. Like that's
Hmm.
part of your,
Hmm.
it's a non-profit now,
Hmm.
right? It's not for profit. So you yourself are also kind of in a service mode, but you help people. Do you help them in revising what they have, or also you help if they are starting a new business, how they can set it up?
Definitely, I can do both. And yeah, just for clarification, so I do have a nonprofit. That one's called Powerful Women Collective. That one is a 501c3 nonprofit here in the United States. I also have a business. So that one's called Powerful Women Synergize. And so those two organizations, the nonprofit and the for-profit, both work in tandem to really help close the power gap for women. But it allows me the opportunity to do exactly like you said. I can do work in the nonprofit to help support Gulf Coast women in Florida. I can also do work in my business to help women nationally on other aspects like pricing, for sure. And I can do that with existing businesses and new businesses. And I tend to look at pricing a little different. I do compare it to industry standards, but I also say that you're not the standard. You're unique. And especially with something like what you do, coaching, it's such a hard thing to compare to other people because there's different levels of coaches all over the place. So if you're in that comparison game, I don't know that that always is serving you. I think it goes back to understanding what your worth is, understanding the value that you provide, and properly pricing that. Because a lot of times what women can do is women can look at other women coaches and say, oh, they're charging that. That's more than I would charge. So that must be what I should charge. In reality, maybe that woman is undervaluing her prices as well. So sometimes when we compare, we give ourselves the excuse to not really pick the price that's the right price.
What would you advise someone starting to know where they stand? Because that's, I think, the big challenge. At least when I did my coaching training back in 2020, most of the people were coming. It was COVID, and everybody was working from home and they had time. So people were still employed and wanting to explore coaching, but they didn't know how to price. They were not savvy about that. What would be a strategy for a new person who is starting their own side hustle or full hustle to price themselves?
Yeah, and pricing tricky. I wouldn't say that pricing is something that people typically get right on the first try. And I try to tell women not to put that much pressure in because sometimes, that can be a deterrent. But definitely market analysis, competitive analysis, doing a lot of focus groups, doing a lot of really getting out there. And before you get to going to market, doing the research before that, understanding really what value you're providing. Not necessarily when you do competitive analysis, don't just compare what you're offering to somebody else, but compare what you're providing in that offer as well. So I definitely, it can be a really tricky thing for pricing. And sometimes, like I said, it can be something that you put out a price and figure out, okay, that's not what the market,
experimentation kind of,
right, what the market wanted. It really has to do with who you're attracting, what services you're offering, and what they're willing to pay in order to solve the problem that they're coming to you for. That really should be the one indicator that drives pricing. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times we go back to standard comparison, or we, look at industry norms, which can be a good starting point, but definitely not.
One technique I heard recently, because at the beginning when I was starting my coaching practice and trying to figure this out, the recommendation was to go with one offer, like just go with one offer so you don't confuse. They say confused mind doesn't buy. But recently, I don't know if it was Alex Hermosi or someone in that kind of domain who have achieved success in what they are doing, made a great idea that we don't leverage a lot, is to at least have 3 levels of your offer. Like it's the same offer, but at 3 levels. Say if they work one-on-one with you, that will take lots of time, and that's the high ticket offer. and then have a mid-ticket offer that could be a group uh, practice, a group coaching sessions, some online, some digital, but like not that much taxing. And then you can offer a second tier. And then he offered a third tier, like even for those who cannot do the high ticket or mid ticket, to still have like a course, for example, that's all online, that is say $97. So his recommendation to not lose a client, like his approach was, if you are talking to someone today, that's a prospect that came to you. And if you're only offering a high ticket offer and they balk at it and you let them go, you lost them. But if you want to keep them in your orbit, keep them familiar with how you can help them, your content, give them a mid-ticket or a digital of product that does not, that is low ticket in a way. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it. Instead of saying, if you have three things, the person will be confused and not buy. It's like actually it's the same thing, but different modes of offering it to meet different price sensitivity
Mm-hmm.
for clients.
Absolutely. And I definitely agree with that too. I tend to approach it maybe backwards from a lot of other advisors in this space. A lot of people start with that low ticket and then they build up. So they first come out with like a low ticket offer,
Yeah.
and then they maybe come out with a mid ticket offer, and then maybe they finally work up to, a high ticket offer. Because sometimes confidence plays into that part. Just like we talked about, mindset has a lot to do with it. It can be intimidating to ask $10,000 or $20,000 of somebody as a high ticket. So it's much easier to say, let me start with a $20 or a $10, lower offer. Unfortunately, I think that's where entrepreneurs and women in particular get into a little bit of a bad rhythm, because what it does is it sets that bar really low. And I tend to do it from the other way. I tend to work on the high ticket offer first and work up the nerve to ask people for that money. And then you can always go down from there. Yeah. So just like you had said, have multiple offers, have different formats of your offers. I think that's absolutely valid, but approaching it from the high to the low instead of the low to the high. Yeah. Because a lot of times what we end up doing is we build confidence at those lower levels, but we never end up building confidence at the high level. Yeah. If we can build confidence at the high level, then that's when we're unstoppable. That's when we know we're going to really be successful, is because we're standing in our own power, and we're standing in our confidence that we're valuable and the service we're providing is really valuable. And yes, if they don't want that $10,000 or that $20,000 offer, well then yeah, I've got something smaller and something smaller and something smaller. But bringing them in at that higher end and saying, look, I am worth it. I am a $10,000 or a $20,000 coach, consultant, or speaker, or whatever it is that you do, and then working down from there. And honestly, I think I learned that quite by accident by running nonprofits, because with a nonprofit, you're constantly asking for money. And it got very easy for me to ask for bigger amounts rather than smaller amounts, because it was half the work. So if I could get a $10,000 or a $20,000 donation, then I didn't have to ask as many times for donations. It's the same thing in our business. If we get attached to the big thing that we're doing and the big value that we're providing, well, then we can always gear down to lower. It's hard to gear up from lower up to higher if we're struggling with confidence, or if something's happening and we're not on our game.
I love that. There is actually some statistics around structuring the business and that pricing model. And it's tricky, like some newcomers in the coaching world think they can start with a $7, $47, $97, but it's very hard to get any success and build equity, build value in the business. And the trick is that most of the big coaches who are selling these low ticket have a very high ticket at the back end that people are not seeing. So if they sell, I remember one very popular person was selling a $7 digital book. And I was thinking, like, what is $7? Why would he even do that? But I discovered when I looked in his profile, he has 4 million followers. If
Mm-hmm.
only 1 million, only one quarter buy a $7 thing, he's still gonna make a good amount of money. But if you only have 200 followers,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna go nowhere. So
Absolutely. And that's exactly what happens. I think people think, oh yeah, for $7, I don't need, I need to sell a whole bunch of them, but it's not that hard because it's only $7. But then when we look at our communities and we look at the people we have that are following us and are interacting with us, we don't have those, millions of followers.
yeah,
So you have to either build a huge community and then offer something low ticket, or build a smaller community and offer something higher ticket and really start attracting those people that are going to actually align with what you're doing and what you're providing.
yeah. Colleen, that is a fascinating discussion. I know many coaches, many other solopreneurs would love to talk more about it. And how can they reach you if they need to connect with you?
Absolutely. The best place to find me is usually LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to share that if you want to add that to the show notes for today's session. Another thing I'd love to offer, if you're okay with it, I have
Yes.
a custom GPT
Yes.
that I would love to offer for your community. If people use that GPT, what it will do is it will prompt them to book a meeting with me.
Uh-huh.
So that's another way they can get on my calendar, is by using that custom GPT. If somebody's a chat GPT user, they can just click on it with their chat open and it'll automatically add to their custom GPTs. There's no email address they have to add or anything like that. So I literally don't see what they're using on that custom GPT. But that one is called Stop the Discount Drain. And it's all about helping women entrepreneurs realize how much they're sacrificing when they discount, or how much more they have to increase their price or increase their sales in order to make up for that lost revenue.
Yeah.
So
That
it's
is
a quick
beautiful.
5-minute calculator that helps walk them
Yes.
through some of those strategic questions.
We'll definitely share that in the gift bundle. And we're gonna put the way to reach you is on LinkedIn, to DM
Yep.
you on LinkedIn. Thank you
Yep.
so much. I really appreciated and enjoyed everything you shared.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Dr. Laura. Thank you for doing this. And I so appreciate you including me. You're
Thank
doing
you.
wonderful things. Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate it. Thank you.